Mark, what's the phone number?
Director Todd, can we check your mic?
Yes, good evening.
Thank you.
We need some technical help for Vince. Joe, Vince needs. Having a little technical difficulties, we'll get started here.
Right, get taken out. Haven't heard about that. We'll try it one more time. I don't know. I don't even know what to make of it. Things for a while. Okay. Wow. Naomi, you asked for a mic check.
Oh, I can hear you. Thank you.
So I'm just going to go ahead.
Is that Councilmember Steckler? Is that you?
Actually, no, it's Councilmember Bond speaking through Councilmember Steckler.
You guys, I need that. We're still waiting for Councilmember Cavallari though, correct?
Yes.
Or maybe I need to put my speakers up. Okay. All right, was there anybody that I didn't check there? We didn't do a sound check.
I have not done a sound check.
Oh, thank you, Laurel. Okay. City manager?
Yeah, we testing 1, 2, 3.
Can you try that on the phone?
Deputy City Manager Martin?
Testing.
Thank you.
You want to take it in the office, or we can see Vince on the chamber, on the council camera, and he's got a mic. So is that okay, Vince?
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking.
Naomi, is the tape started?
I'm going to start it now.
Okay, apologize for the delays, a little technical difficulties. I will call the October 12th regular meeting of Mill Creek City Council to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Bond, would you lead us to that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Naomi, roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor Holtzclaw,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vanel,
Here.
Councilmember Bond,
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Briles,
Here.
Councilmember Morgan.
Here.
Thank you, Naomi. Okay, we will move to the audience communication portion of our meeting. As you may see on the screen, we now have a neutral arbiter of time. So Maybe we have a timer up on the screen so that we don't have any disputes over 3 minutes. Would anyone like to speak to the council tonight? Raise your hand or audibly. So we don't have anyone in the audience in person tonight. And it looks like I only have one screen people going once, twice. Okay, there will be another opportunity for audience communication as always at the end of the meeting. Before we move into the agenda, city manager has requested that we have a brief executive session. It should take no more than 10 minutes to discuss an item that will be on the agenda tonight. Is there any objection to amending the agenda to have a brief executive session? Okay, hearing no objection. The council will go into executive session to discuss the status of collective bargaining negotiations pursuant to RCW 42.30.40 subsection 4. No action will be taken. We shouldn't need more than 10 minutes, so that will be 6:17. With that, we are going to step away from
Council has extended executive session for 3 more minutes. Council extended for another 2 minutes. Thanks everyone for your patience.
Okay, the council has concluded its executive session. We are back into the agenda. We are into the first of 2 presentations. The first being on the capital improvement projects update. Michael and Director Todd.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn the floor over to Director Todd immediately to begin on the update question. Director Todd. Mayor, if we don't hear from Mike Todd, we're going to, for the sake of time, respectfully suggest we move.
I'm working on it. Here we go.
Okay, thank you.
I had some weird things happening here. Hopefully that works. Okay, so I'm going to try to get my screen to come up now. There we go. Okay, can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. I can't hear anybody in the council chambers.
Yeah.
Thank you. So tonight we're going to talk about capital projects update. You were looking for an update on how we are on our long list of capital projects. I'm going to work through that here fairly quickly, but we'll take questions at the end. The Just a minute, still struggling. There we go. So kind of we can recap where we were last fall. I was new, staff was all gone. And so Jeff Valentine and I presented during that, during our budget creation process and also the CIP creation process. We kind of talked about where things were. And basically we had lots of open projects in 2020 due to COVID and staff turnover. So we're in the process of trying to finish those up. And so the way we developed that capital plan was just to roll many of these projects and programs over from 1920 to the 21 for 22 for further refinement as we got restaffed. And we went into this at that time knowing it would be revised and amended and staffing was in place. And so overall, we said, let's stay within the same overall budget. And Jeff Valentine at that time figured out a way to make sure we were funded for the 21-22 capital program, but still knew we had lots of definition to work on. You may remember at that time, we talked about a new framework, really talking about programs versus projects, programs being ongoing things and projects being one-off things. Frank ran through that a couple of weeks ago to kind of reintroduce and reinforce that concept. And we introduced that new staging terminology for better communication and coordination between staff and the council, where we talked about the concept stage, the planning and scoping stage, the design stage, and then finally the implementation or construction stage. So we're trying to use that language to be more purposeful about how we go about projects and have better check-ins with the council when we're moving between the phases. How this last year has gone, we shortly after the beginning of 2021, we went out and looked for restaffing our city engineering department. We put out 3 positions at that time for a city engineer, a project engineer, for surface water coordinator. It took a little time to get those executed, but we found a very good one in terms of city engineer Frank Reinhardt, started on May 24th, and he's been working at 100 miles an hour since then. Right after he got here, we went through the resumes we'd received and the ones we'd received after he got on board, and hired Alex Copeland as our project engineer. And then by the time she moved over here and got acquainted, it was August 2nd. So she's really only been here about 2 months and was working on projects that I'll talk about in just a moment. At that same time, I had originally looked for a surface water engineer, we called it at the time. And to be honest, the applicant flow that we got, we had some very capable people, but they were more focused on capital projects. And we really needed somebody who was more conversant and able to run our NPDES MS4 program. You heard us talk last fall about the importance of aligning with the Department of Ecology requirements. That was a big deal. It still is a big deal. We're fortunate that Frank is very experienced and had past experience at the Department of Ecology. So he's been carrying that ball probably more than half of his time looking for a surface water program person. We went back out to market just recently and we're interviewing last week and this week and next week. And we've got some pretty good prospects. So I think we're gonna be able to get that filled. One of the other things we did this year was done an awful lot of old projects need to wrap up, and the projects themselves were done by 2021, but there's lots of paperwork and minor details. So we spent a lot of time closing those out. Overall, the whole market saw supply chain issues, designer issues, in terms of not enough designers out there to do the work, and contractors with COVID and just everybody anxious to do projects. Despite COVID, it turned out it was a really tight situation. So we really strategically said, let's work on the fundamentals and prepare a foundation for the future, knowing that we had a project engineer coming on board and lots of work to do to get caught up on things. So just to recap again, our programs, our big customary programs we typically talk about, these typically have been budgeted for every year. One of the things we're thinking about doing is doing these every other year. Because just as I said last fall, we had too many projects expected for us to do every year. And the sheer number of programs is the problem. The way it's looking now is we put off any pavement preservation or rehabilitation in 2021 due to the tight contractor situation that just didn't have the designs done. So you'll see a bigger than normal program in 2022, and then we'll taper it off from there. But we still got work to do, but we've kind of patched our way through to make sure we're still in good situation. Street pavement marking program, we didn't do one this year. We'll do it probably every other year. So next year, 2022 will be the big program. But in the interim, we've done some small things. You've seen and heard from Matthew Combs that his staff has taken on the capability of putting down the raised pavement markers, the RPMs, the turtles. And so they've done some spot repairs here and there, which has really helped us work through some of the current issues that were kind of lagging and behind. And so we're going to continue to do that as weather and their time permits. Same thing with concrete sidewalk replacement program. In the past, we tried to do these as a staff once every year or two. That takes contracting and it takes energy to go out and manage those projects. We didn't do any big projects in 21. We will probably do a big project in 22. But again, Matthew and his staff have been able to do some of the emergent repairs for sidewalk panels. And they've done a great job on a couple of those where we had some bad tripping hazards, and they are continuing to do the pavement shaving, again, through self-performing it rather than going out for contract, because it's often easier and quicker to do things that way. Surface water aging infrastructure program. We did have a program in 2021. You approved it a little while ago. That's our C failure pipelining. And we'll do that again in 22. Catch basin inspection and cleaning. This is a big part of our NPDES issue. We are way behind. Shouldn't say we're way behind. We are dilatory in doing this. We kind of skipped a couple of years in the previous permit cycle. And so this continues to be a tough issue for us. We've done some spot cleaning, some spot inspections. We're working on that now. It's one of the things that Alex has started taking on. Frank's been doing some, Matthew's been doing some. I've even taken a look at a few, but we'll be ramping that program up in next year. That is one where we probably will have to find some money more than we planned. We had originally planned like $100,000 a year. That probably is not enough to get caught up. We'll talk about that later when we get it scoped. And the last one on that slide was traditionally we talked about trail preservation or rehabilitation, where we've got roots that are coming up through asphalt sidewalks or asphalt pathways. We'll review that program and refine that program in 2022. And there's a couple of big projects out there that we're aware of that we just didn't get to this year. But again, Matthew and his crew, take a walk up a North Creek Trail here in the next week or two before it gets too rainy, or go over look at Highlands Park. These guys did a phenomenal job of self-performing dealing with some really bad roof situations and repaving it. So again, I'm really proud of them being able to fill in during a tough time. Other programs in there, get the sense here, there's lots of programs, lots of things to manage. New program, there was one that was in the capital plan called Bridge Monitoring and Improvement Program. It originally showed to start it in 2021, is some scoping, and then start spending some money in 22. I'm just moving that out a year, to be honest. We have not delved into that yet. I don't think that's hurt us, but that was a new program that was proposed. We just haven't had a chance to get to with all of our work on NPDES, Department of Ecology issues, and getting our other programs going. We also talked about a street tree replacement program. Again, that's something we need to scope and really figure out. We have dealt with individual street tree issues with homeowners associations and new developers in terms of recommending the right kind of trees and recommending root barriers and things like that. But there are some places where we do have some trees that 15 years ago looked like a good idea and are now causing us trouble. So that will be a program we need to define and work on in 2022. And the last one I put down there is we've had a traffic calming program in place for, I think it's been 10 years. City of Monroe called up recently and said, hey, we heard you got a program. We'd like to clone your program. I said, well, honestly, it's been a long time, but here's our route, our base information. You're welcome to use that. But we think we were going to go and do an RFQ to get somebody to help us reboot that program. A lot of things have happened in the last 10 years in terms of traffic calming. This is a need. We hear from citizens in certain places where they're wishing for a speed bump. Speed bumps aren't the best answer, but there's other things we can do to kind of go on a road diet and narrow certain wide sections down, so encourage people not to speed. So that will be something we'll be defining through the winter, probably hiring a consultant. We'll come to you and talk to you about that when the time comes and start implementing that 2022. Projects, just to remind us all, we wrapped up from 2020. A lot of these were left over when staff left. The Seattle Hill Road repavement, it took forever to get that done through just a lot of different gyrations. It was a federal project with state funding, or state oversight of the federal funding, I should say. It finally is closed out. It looks really good, but we are still in the process of closing out some of those things, waiting for all of the proper paperwork, and so we can release the retainage to that contractor. 2020 grade C pipe rehab, that took a long time. Again, that didn't get done until early in 2021. And we had to defer one of the patches. It just didn't make sense for the contractor to come back. That same contractor is the one that you all approved the award of the contract to for our 21 project. And so those patches we'll catch up on that and start the new project here soon. 2020 pavement marking, we felt it acutely. They missed a bunch of the RPMs again during COVID. They weren't very interested in coming back. So that's some of the work that Matthew and his crew have done, is to go back and fix what they missed. And as I said earlier, in 2022, we'll have a new program that will pick up some striping that needs to be done every couple of years, and some more RPMs in places where it's not just a few here and there. It's maybe on more major roads. Heron Park upgrade that got done. You may remember there was fire damage in the middle of that one. That complicated that project because we had to get out of the site while the fire damage was being repaired, and or back in with the contractor who was replacing the roof, replacing the play structure. That is finally done and out of our hair. Pavement condition reporting. This is something that was great that staff started last year, but it didn't get completed. The vendor had a problem with their data collection device, but they got that final reporting done for us in the spring. And Frank and I are looking at that, just starting to look at that data and say, this is what's going to help us define the priorities for our pavement rehabilitation programs that are something that's really important for us to do as our infrastructure ages. That's going to be a great database that helps us know exactly what to do. And Frank will be coming, I think it's in November, we've talked about coming to council and talking about pavement preservation techniques that are used in Kirkland, which is one of the big leaders around here in terms of the right way to do it without spending too much money. So we'll be talking about that in November. And the last one there is miscellaneous closeouts. It's amazing how many things are dragging around. The other day I got a phone call that we'd had some paperwork from the 35th Avenue project. We were supposed to have reported on the bike and ped utilization of the funding we received from the state under the Connecting Washington grant. And that should have been done in 2019. And they called me last week and said, where's this report? So we're still tracking some of those loose ends down. In 21, things that are in progress right now, as you've heard about us talking about the PAC, the Planning Advisory Committee is close to has completed their work, and we're going to be coming to council soon to talk about their recommendations from the Mill Creek Boulevard sub-area study. So we're in implementation mode on that project. One of the projects that's in that same area, that's Stormwater 25 was the project number. It's the pond repair for.
Mike, hold on for a second. Huge noise in here. We're not able to hear you. I think they finally got it. Yeah, you were just totally drowned out when you went to the slide. Sorry.
We had audio distortion here in the chamber, but I think it's resolved now.
Okay, would you like me to go back, or are we good?
Oh, just pick up where you were.
Thank you, Brian. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So 25th, Surface Water 25 was Pond 6. It's on Mill Creek Boulevard. We are likely to push that off a little bit, and wrap it into whatever we decide about Mill Creek Boulevard sub area. There's a recommendation from the PAC to look at a regional stormwater facility and some just general improvements to the streetscape. And so it makes sense to do that all together. You're all very aware of the DRCC property conceptualization. That was a new project this year that got added in. We're definitely in the concept phase on that one. A traffic signal upgrade project. This is a tiny one, like Frank talked a couple of weeks ago. The capital improvement project list in many cases should be big projects that are more than $25,000. This is a $14,000 project. It's our part of a countywide project because it was a project and it uses capital funds. It ended up on that list, but this one costs us nothing in terms of time other than signing a check once a month. So that one is done and not in our hair, or getting done and not in our hair. And the last one there, the historic panel project. You've heard about that one too. That's the panels on Main Street on the bridge. And that's mostly done. We still have some work to do to upgrade the lighting on the bridge. That lighting is very old fluorescent. Some of those fixtures are corroded. We're looking at doing some LED projects, some LED fixture replacements for that project to make that more attractive. Current activity in Public Works Engineering Group. We are in the construction phase for the 2021 C-grade rehab project that has not started yet. They've got supply chain issues. It's 10 weeks until the material can arrive. They had COVID go through their whole crew. And so they have not started that. We'd hope they would, but Frank is working closely with them on when they can schedule that. And we'll give you an update. It may indeed be after Christmas, or after the end of the year, I should say, based on the availability of materials, but we'll keep you posted on that one. The Jackson High School mid-block crosswalk is in our capital project. As you know, we're in the design phase, headed towards construction later this year and early next year. And right behind that, we had called it the Complete Streets Pedestrian Improvements, again, design and construction. I apologize for the typo there. Those together are wrapped up using our Transportation Improvement Board Complete Streets money. So those are all wrapped together. You'll see us coming back in November for approval, your approval and sign off to go out to bid. We'll go out to bid and get that awarded and slated for construction in December and get it done by end of March, one way or the other, because that's when the money will run out. Crosswalk RRFB upgrades. This was the original project from the Complete Streets money. We probably won't need to do anything on this. We want to make sure we used all the Complete Streets money. That's one of those rare grants where you get the money ahead of time, and if you don't use it, you have to give it back. So we're working very hard to make sure we're not giving anything back. But this would be potentially putting in newer version solar units, more batteries, something or other at those crossings at Heatherwood Middle School and Mill Creek Elementary School to get back at those units that didn't work all that well, granted that they were 10 years old. And the last one there, GIS implementation and the NPDES permit work, that's a big project. Again, it's foundational things, but that's active, something we're working on. Coming up, excuse me, this is more things that were in the list for 2021. Just want to give you a status update. One of our big ones is the eGov Spine Road right-of-way and the surface water. We did some engineering work on this, trying to see if there was still an opportunity before the farm got completed to convey that water uphill, from uphill at Advent Lutheran Church, down through the Rimkim property and the 132nd Street, down through Vintage, down through the farm to the lowest spot. We missed the boat on that actually a couple of years ago. The elevation of the pipes are such that there was no way to feed it underneath the farm unless we drill. So that is one of the options. But Frank has got some experience and we may look at some other alternatives. But we paused that because the sense of urgency of doing it before the farm was completed went away once we discovered that the elevation of the pipes were stopping us. This is still an expensive project. Laurel is nervous because we have in our CIP $500,000 for right-of-way acquisition, but we don't have the $9 million or $10 million to execute on this. I'm still flabbergasted by the number, but there's a lot of water to be detained from Advent Lutheran 132nd and the Rimkim property and a bunch of roadway to do. This is a good topic, I think, for a retreat sometime to talk about strategically what do we want to do with our eGov? Do we want to continue with the spine road? There's a lot of advantages to doing that in terms of making that a more viable, accessible area, but it is costly. And so that one is on hold in terms of engineering work. And I think it's really, we should schedule this for a future discussion with council in terms of which direction we want to go, because it's expensive. Next one there is City Hall North, HVAC's roof, seismic, that's all wrapped together. You remember about a year ago, we were hoping we'd be out of COVID and we had dreams of reinvigorating our passport, adding Twix cards, adding the TSA pre-checks, and we're going to turn this into a bigger revenue stream. The concept there that Jeff Ballantyne was promoting was we would do that here in City Hall North, and we'd take the staff that lives in City Hall North right now and move them to the upstairs. When that got a little tough as COVID came along, we just put a pause on this. And really it makes a difference for us to decide how we put those projects together. So we're putting off the roof for another year. We did a patch, I think we'll be fine. The seismic upgrade, you don't really want to do that unless you want to do that before you do the roof. And the HVAC, it'd be so much easier to fix our problems if we were able to just tear out walls and start over again upstairs. But that makes it a bigger tenant improvement kind of question. So like I said, it's all on hold. We need to strategically figure out what we want to do with this space. Right now, the problem, as you've heard, is we've got many of the HVAC units are on their last legs or worse. And so many of our tenant spaces upstairs are not fully heated or air conditioned. And they're vacant right now. Public Workshop, it was delayed by COVID. Remember, our dream was to go and talk to Silver Lake Water District and see if they were willing to relinquish their property they have on 132nd, including their Public Works shop. They would retain the back of the property, the south part of the property for their tank, but they thought we'd be good neighbors, and we thought we'd be good neighbors to have our maintenance yard and some of our trucks protected in the building they have there. Got delayed by COVID. They decided they needed to split their workforce between two sites in case they had a COVID problem, and they got attached to that idea. So they are not, we're not absolutely not interested in talking to us at all about sharing that space. Just in the last couple of weeks, their board and their management has talked about, well, maybe they'll relinquish some of that space. And so this could come back on our plate in the next month or two. The problem is I think they're still attached to their maintenance shop, which is the part that's most attractive to us, but it is a good location for sharing with them because we'd be compatible neighbors And it does have a way to get some of our equipment out of City Hall South, where we're getting too much rolling stock and too many supplies for it to be in the City Hall parking lot. One of the projects was the City Hall and library entry upgrades. I believe this was about improving, replacing the openers and the doors themselves from a lot of use on City Hall South. And at the library, to be frank, we just postponed that because there's not been a lot of traffic through the doors for either the library or the City Hall. And so we put that off to 2022. Library flooring and HVAC replacement, those are new things. There's a problem with the library flooring in what was the extension of that building many years ago, late 90s, I believe it was. They went from a tiny library to a little bit bigger, small library. And the flooring, when it was first put in, it looks like it was not done with the right materials. It should have been rated panels and a little bit thicker. And over the period of time, the glue is broken. So it's been pretty spongy floor. We tore it up recently, looked at it, and we're probably looking at $50,000 to put in new joists and new flooring in the entire, 3,600 feet of the new section of the library. The library themselves is going to invest a similar amount of money putting in new carpeting and rearranging their shelves. So we're working right now and trying to get out for bids on that and do that project sometime, probably first of next year. HVAC replacement, we've had to fix a couple units here, fix a couple units in the library. We've got that under control. So really the scoping and design is talking more about the flooring part of it. And the last one is the Silvercrest Park. We've talked about that. When we went into the budget, into the CIP, we didn't have funding lined up. But now we've applied that funding from the county, $100,000 under their ILA from their REAP funding. And we also had funding that we got from the state as a line item in the capital program. And those we're in the process of kind of scoping and planning that. And you'll hear more from us this fall about as we start to collect some ideas of what we need in terms of functionality and repairs in the park, but also looking at what amenities the public might be interested in within our budget. Upcoming in the budget, we've got the park roof next year. This is the Pine Meadow Park. It is probably at the end of its life. And so we're looking at 2022 for that. North Creek Trail Study. To be honest, this is kind of a nebulous dream that someone had to do some work on the North Creek Trail. We need to find that and affirm whether that's something we want to spend money on. My assessment right now, if you had me make a snap judgment, I think there's something we can put off. I think we got better things to do with our time and money, but we can re-dig into that if people are interested next year. Not presently active from our budget. The Gateway and Presence Improvement. That's a project that's been in there since the 1718 capital improvement project. I recently dug up what little history I have and asked our new communications marketing folks, Jody and Scott, to take a look to see if they could find something. This came out of our communications marketing department. It talked about changing our logo, changing our colors potentially, and putting new signs at some of our entrances. I'm in favor of, and I think most of you would be in favor of, updating the signs. There's some places we have the old style signs for their entrances, most notably on 164th and also on Dumas, where we've got the very old signs. But we need to redefine that, figure out what we want to do. Is it repaint the existing signs with the same colors or new colors, or what would it be? So I'm putting that as a needs definition category. 35th Avenue pedestrian crossing, the mayor brought this one up. I think when the idea was when the farm opens their wetland sanctuary on the east side of 35th, there will be an increased desire for people to cross 35th, and there is no crossing other than 132nd on the north and 148th on the south. And so it's a long way between traffic lights. So people jaywalk. And so this would be looking at a pedestrian crossing somewhere in that long stretch. Part of the development agreement with the farm was that they would do a traffic study. And as you know, a traffic study is required if we put an intersection anywhere in a mid-block location. We might do better to put it at one of the intersections of the roadways that go into North Point. But we're really early in that concept phase. So we've not fallen off of our radar, but until we kind of see what kind of traffic is going to go on and when the developer opens that to public access, probably early next spring, it'll make more sense for us to figure out what kind of crossings required. And the last one, just for completeness, Emergency Operations Center was on there. There was some dream about having an operations center upstairs in this building. Then we got to thinking about it and said, boy, this building is not the greatest place for that because we don't have generator backup power. We have some issues that I talked about earlier in terms of the roof and seismic upgrades, and upstairs is not a great place for an EOC necessarily. So I put that back in a redefined category. I think our new chief, city manager, and our public works crew will need to think about what we want to do, whether it's indeed in one of the buildings we have, if it's a mobile center, do we partner with somebody else? I think that one needs a lot of definition before we move on. Staging and gating decisions. Remember, we talked about this, lots of opportunities for you to check in before we move. I'm just reminding you that we did check in with you for awarding the 2021 grade C pipe rehab. That's in progress. The Jackson Crosswalk, Complete Streets Pedestrian Improvements, construction contract will be coming up next, probably November, December. So we'll come to you and ask you for permission to put that out to bid. And then we checked in with you on accepting grant funding. That's one of our rules we're trying to play by now too, is take that grant funding and make sure we go through you. So you hope to accept that the ILA from Snohomish County, and the state capital grant funding will also come to you formally. We had to do some work with the historic, I can't remember exactly, it's DHP, Department of Historic Preservation. You got to prove that there was no historic things you're going to disturb when you use state funding on a park. And so we've just got that paperwork last week. And so we're bringing that to you formally, but that is money that's in the state capital grant program. Both sets of money go through 2022. So again, our focus has been bringing on our new project engineer, integrating Alex as of October 2nd into our programs. We're recruiting the surface water program coordinator and then onboarding that person. That's going to offload a lot of the work Frank's doing right now, because our top priority has had to be in complying with the Department of Ecology requirements. As you all know, that is very important to get caught up on that. So Frank's been spending a lot of time there. We're looking forward to getting a good person on, getting them onboarded, and offloading some of Frank's time so he can help us with some more capital projects. And right there, implement those permit elements is a big focus for us. And there's a lot of foundational tools and materials we need to put in place. We had procurement processes that didn't line up with the latest requirements for WSDOT. So we had to do that before we could go out and award the contract for our 2021 pipe repairs. Standard details, the last time they were updated here was 2016. So Alex has spent the last month and a half going through every one of those standard details. So it's easy for either contractor working for us or building contractors in the private sector to say, I'm going to do this according to Mill Creek Standard Detail 1-37 that tells you how to restore pavement or how to put in a low impact development facilities for stormwater, those kinds of things. So having those details in place is something, instead of doing it one at a time, we've done them all, and we're going to be very proud of having that available. Document filing systems, you've heard us talk about it before. We're coming into a better place where we can find things. Frank's done a great job of putting procedures and systems in place for that. And then fundamentally, a lot of the work we're doing is about assets that are geographically located around our city. And so a geographically based information system, the GIS, is very important to us. We're implementing that. We have all of our data that had been around here, maps and other files has all been converted over. We're focusing on surface water first, but next, this is going to be the foundation in 2022 for us to start looking at how we do some better asset management, get some measurement tools to keep us on top of managing the assets that make up our city's infrastructure. And with that, that's a rush through it. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mike. A lot of information there. Questions? Start with Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Director Todd. Thanks for the presentation. First off, I really appreciate how we kind of really set this up as far as project stage. It's very accessible. It's very user friendly. We see where all the projects are at. So thanks for the whole team for that. But I've got two questions. First question is the agreement we have with the library for flooring and HVAC. What is our agreement and how? And my understanding is I thought we were in charge of the outside of the library, inside. So we get some guidance on that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The way the lease works on many commercial buildings, and ours is the same, as you're right, inside the envelope, the paint on the walls, the shelves they put up, the flooring, the carpet is theirs, but the structure of the roof, the structure of the walls, the parking lot, and in this case, the subflooring that holds up their carpeting is our part of the envelope that we're required to work with them on. The good news in this case is that the carpet is old. They're ready to replace that. We're fortunate we don't have to replace a failing floor and argue about who's going to put new carpet in there. But that's a good question. We think that's a good place to draw that line and work in our partnership with those folks.
Thank you. And the next question is for Silvercrest Park. Several neighbors in that area have contacted me in the last couple of days for, I guess, kind of an approximation of when we're going to break ground. Any ideas?
Well, we will do it in the building season of 2022 because we need to spend the money by the end of 2022. What we're talking about is probably putting it out, I would say springtime, and try to get construction done in the summer. But we got to get it done before it gets too wet at the end of the year. So I think it's a summertime kind of construction in general. Preparatory to that, the staff and I are going to go out there and look. And part of that project, you may remember, at least it was written in the description, was putting in some irrigation. I'm not exactly sure what irrigation we require. We've got a gravel path that I think would be benefit to put it to an asphalt surface, because right now that gravel is kind of problematic. It ends up down into our storm drains. We know the basketball court has got some root issues. The fence has got some issues. So we're going to look at those things in terms of functionality. Then we're also going to reach out to the neighbors, kind of not just the neighbors right next to it, but the neighbors in that general area. And I know there's some of those folks who would like to weigh in on the kinds of things for that neighborhood park. Because this is not a really destination park. It's a neighborhood park. So we'll be doing that probably this fall, and we'll work with the Parks and Rec Board on that too. Fundamentally, we want to make sure we don't get our eyes bigger than our wallets on lots of crazy things that we just don't have the money for, because we've got $350,000 total budgeted for that.
Right, and thank you for that. And just a little food for thought regarding the 35th Ave crosswalk or crossing. I've heard recently, actually for about the last 6 months to a year, be construed as near misses, pedestrian car crashes. I know as we get connected, as you stated, with the farm, it's going to increase. It's going to become a destination. So I know I'm one council member here, but I'm hoping that for the safety of the residents, that we maybe fast track this into the conversation sooner rather than later in the 22 budget, just to start the dialogue of what it's going to look like, and at least getting something on paper where we see there's going to be a plan in place to make sure that we're operating as safely as possible in that area. Because as you stated, I think 132nd and the next available light was on 148th. And it's a pretty substantial margin, and we're almost inviting the jaywalk there. So last thing we want to do is put people in harm's way. So thank you for the presentation. Thank you.
It's almost precisely 1 mile. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually, Director Todd, I actually had on my list one of the things that Councilmember Cavallari mentioned, so I want to add on to what he was saying. I'm having lots of people when I am out in the North Point area, the Meadows area, that are asking me, when are we going to have that crosswalk in, and telling me how excited they are and how they've been going over there and walking. So everyone is already going over there, even though it's technically not officially open to everybody yet. And so I was not sure. I told them that we were going to talk about it once the developer has been over to us. So I was not sure the timeline. I should be telling people to start to expect something to move on that crosswalk over there to get them over that mitigation area. So I am also getting questions about it, and there's definitely a need for it. The residents are excited. They're using that area, so we need to get them a process. Do you have a timeline where you? I mean, I realize it, but do you have a timeline where you think that you would start to look at it?
So I think I heard you say that you're looking for a timeline when we think we might start working on the concepts. I'm thinking next summer. Right now, that is not open. The gate's closed. It's private property. But as you know, a lot of people are out there walking around, which is great. But the developer's not opened it up yet. We've recommended to them that he let the plants establish over the winter, dark, wet season, not a great time to have people out there anyway because there's no lights. But recommending to him to open it in the spring. So I think that that makes sense to say, okay, either get him to pay for that traffic study if we want to, or maybe we'll just say, let's go ahead ourselves. But I think we can start penciling out some ideas. Remember, if we do anything that's not at an intersection, we have to do a mid-block crossing assessment. And right now, it would not have enough demand to show that it's justified. So we would get a hard no on the viability of doing it. So we're kind of playing a little bit of cat and mouse here. But I think it makes sense. I think once we open that, we're going to have a lot of people who'd like to walk in there. Even with the gate open, there's going to be a limited amount of parking. And for sure, the people who live at North Point or over at Highland Trails, they're going to want to walk over there. And you're right, it's a long ways to a traffic light. So everybody's going to cross jaywalk. I jaywalk, and we all jaywalk because it's too far to go. So we'll look at that probably next spring. I'd love to start looking at it when the developer is going to open that gate and allow people to come in there.
Mike, you referenced that there are several projects that need more definition. When would be the time that we have those discussions? Would that be next year as part of the CIP update with the budget, or would it be sooner than that?
I think that's probably the best way to look at it. I think the CIP, I'm dreaming about the CIP for 23, 24 being one that we all, council and staff, all really believe in. It's got numbers we can really go by. Right now, Laura and I were talking this afternoon, everything is so nebulous because a lot of these things were not well defined, and our staff capacity to even plan those out or scope them out is tough. So I think that's our objective in 22 is to get that cleaned up. That just some of those discussions, we're going to come to you in council and say, what do you think this means? Let's take the idea, like Frank was showing, there's lots of ideas that need to come in to the concept phase of that funnel and then know which direction we're going to move forward. We're going to do some of that work next year before we start bringing a draft CIP to you next fall, because by then it's probably too late to have that depth of discussions. But we're still in a balancing act, again, with Frank fairly new, Alex really new, surface water persons yet to come. We're still staffing up.
Fair enough, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Stecker.
Thank you, Director Dodd. I was the one that was haranguing about getting this update. But thank you for putting it together and putting together all the detail in it. One thing I don't think that we're lacking here is a need for projects. That's what I see. That's clearly a capacity. We went right on. One of the reasons why I wanted this really was for all of us to get on a clear page of expectation. 2020 was a tough year. We have to do projects, do very few. And I think in 2021 there was an expectation that maybe there was a hope that we would get a number of these projects done, like, for example, the Jackson High School crosswalk, the Silvercrest Park, because those fundings came available, so we had the money, but obviously it didn't happen. And out of everything you said, the only one I'm concerned about actually is the Jackson crosswalk, because it's a really tight schedule to make sure you're going to get a construction bid to be able to get the contractors in. And it sounds like almost a 30-day period of time to get it done. Make sure you get it done before that money, that grant expires. So that's the only one that concerns me, but I trust you have to tell me that it's done if we don't lose that point, having to pay for that out of the city fund. But I think it would be a really, really, really good idea. We could get from you prior to next year, and for the council to get from you a picture of expectation. What project can we expect in 2020? Because I saw all the 2022 projects you've got on there, and I'm over that all of them. I know how it works. We keep rolling them ahead, and then we see what we get done, and what we don't get done, we roll the next year. But what should we expect to see in 2022? There's kind of, okay, I know I'm going to get these 3 done. Maybe I might get these additional ones done. But let's set the expectations a little bit clearer in our head, what those expenses are going to be and what we should expect to do. And more importantly, what do you need that you don't have to make sure you can get it done and speak up now so that we don't have I couldn't get it done because it issue. I really want to see us move ahead on some of these projects. Yes, we're going through a pandemic. What does our and most important, I'd love to get a level set expectation.
Yeah, you're breaking up, but I think you were saying, I think this kind of goes along with what the mayor was saying earlier too. I think that's our objective in 22 is to figure out what we really can do and then come back and say, okay, we can't run 10 of these at once, or we need more help to do the 10 you really want to do, or is there some clever way we can spread some of these out? So for instance, do we do a paving program every year, or do we do a bigger one every other year? So just our capacity for doing projects improves. Frank and I are very concerned about the number. I talked about it long before he got here about how many projects staff had taken on in the 1920 biennium. Was more than they'd ever taken on, twice the dollar number they'd ever taken on. And guess what happened? We were disappointed in our ability to perform. So you're exactly right. We want to get to a point where we know what we're going to do, and we can give you a commitment that says these are the projects we will do. Here's what we need to get there, both money and resources, and the clarity of design early on, so we don't get partway started and then have to change our direction, which has happened to us in the past too.
I think Mayor and I may be on the same page, but just a point of clarification. I thought he was talking more, maybe I'm wrong, at the end of 22. I was thinking more at the end of 21 going into 22. What can we expect to see in 20? That's a clarification that I was asking.
We can give you a better bite at that. I don't know that we can get you a perfect bite because there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of things that aren't defined. One of the things that we're going to talk about, upcoming meeting, we're going to talk to you about surface water program overall, give you a sense of what the program means, where we are, what that program means. I think that's coming up later. I can't remember which one's October and November, and also pavement preservation program. Big decision for us as a city to talk about, do we grind and overlay everything full 2 inches, or do we do some thinner overlays, or what other options are available to us? That's going to kind of tell us what we can do, how much it's going to cost, and the kind of programs we could perform. I mentioned earlier too, Matthew and his crew are working on trying to figure out ways that we can self-perform some of these things. So maybe we don't have a big sidewalk, a big concrete replacement project every year, because those are tough to manage. It takes time to go out and get a contract in place and manage those contracts. You know, on one hand, we think, oh, this is great, we can go out and contract with it. But, you know, Matthew burns up a lot of time searching for vendors and tracking them down, even on the small projects. So one of the things we're looking at is how we can do some of those self-performing, some small things on an annual basis, and then only do the big projects every other year. Again, looking way for capacity. This is still a work in progress. Tough. Matthew doesn't have enough guys to keep up with the things he does have, but I think there's some things we can do by making better use of our expertise on things that really matter, and farming out some other things and finding some different clever ways to fund these overall. I hear you 100%, Councilmember Steckler. I'm with you too. I'd like to be able to get to a point where we're really sure. I just can't promise that we can get that done late this year. We can give you another bite at what we think we're going to do. I mean, we should have a check-in late this year, very early next year, and kind of talk about which direction we're headed.
Would it be safe to say that I'm pretty guaranteed you're going to get the crosswalk and park done? We're going to lose that money.
Well, I missed most of that. I think you were saying the crosswalk and the park. Yes, we will get those done because we're not going to lose that money.
Councilman Segler, you can be closer to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't being close enough to my mic. Yeah, I was just saying that I assume you can guarantee us the crosswalk and the park renovation, because we don't do it, we're going to lose the money. So that's two we can count on.
Yep.
And then the question is really, what is realistic of other expectations, given your crew, given the time, given where we're at? I just, I'd like to, I think it's good for the council to have that.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Yeah, I'll just tell you, people in the chambers, if you are not close to your microphone, we only get about half of it. It's breaking up a lot. It's worse this week than in the past, but we're having a really hard time hearing.
We have you.
That works.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you, Director Todd. We will move on to continuation of the discussion now on the preliminary budget amendments.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll turn it over to our finance director, Paul Kinzel.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so to start out, it's not moving again. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that we all understood we are just working on a budget amendment right now. So overall, we are at October 12th, so we're about midway through this process. I do have some points I want some guidance on tonight, and then from the consensus, I will then put everything together to be ready to present for the property tax levy and EMS levy, because we will need a public hearing and we'll need to set both levies by ordinance. So I do want to remind everyone, the budget proposal does not have to be final at this time. We just do need it to be final by the November 23rd, if possible. And worst case scenario, we can go through December 31st, but we do have to have the levy set by the November 9th when we do the public hearings. And if needed, we can do another budget amendment, say if we had a project that we had not expected, that is something we can do up through December 31st of 2022 after this budget amendment. So if we miss anything, we can still get it put into the budget later on. So I'm just gonna go and generally go over everything again. We're gonna start with the general fund. I will note I did make a few changes since the last time I presented this, just because we did have some transfers that needed to be done. We did talk about the municipal arts. We talked about capital improvements. So as we work our way through this, we'll touch on all of this stuff. So at this point in time, we do have some recreation revenue for 2021. We are hoping that by mid-2022, we're back up and running like normal, fingers crossed. We do know that farm sales and use tax is going to fall off about 2022. And then I have added a transfer of 1.1 million to the capital improvement fund from the general fund for one-time construction sales tax revenues. From there, I also have added a $20,000 transfer to the municipal arts fund for capital projects. All of this is related to the capital improvement fund projects that Director Todd was talking about. At this point in time, I have not included ARPA revenues or expenses in anything, just because it skewed things. And before our final budget amendment is approved, I will go ahead and add that revenue and expense in, just so that we have the authority to spend that money if we need to. Okay, so the only main difference that you will be seeing tonight from the last time we looked at this is I did adjust the EMS levy. I have not included any kind of increase in regular property taxes. So those are all flat. I have included construction that the county noted that could be added to the property taxes. EMS, I have added the 1% each year. And then sales tax, I adjusted a hint. Overall on 2021 and 2022, the overall amount is still the same as you saw last week, but it's just divvied out a little bit differently. So you'll notice on licenses and permits, you have a significant decrease from 2019 and 930,000 to 600,000 in 2020. So we do know that that is related to the farm. We have passport revenue losses of about 1.1 million. So I did adjust 2021 because that's roughly where we're projecting we're going to be falling. And then we're hoping 2022 will be a better year. So I did increase that revenue, hoping that COVID is not going to shut down the federal government for passports. And then recreation also was down. I did go ahead and start increasing that for 22, 21. I just have where we think we're falling right now. So I think that is everything on this one. And then the pie chart is just, you have taxes that make up the vast majority of our revenues. And I'm not entirely sure why the labels are not coming through on that. So I apologize for that.
Laura, are we allowed to ask questions on slides? You go through them?
What
Are
was
we allowed to ask questions on slides as we go through them?
Yeah.
Okay. So the sales and use tax line going from 3.953 to 3.614. I think I know the answer, but please explain to me the decrease of
That's
40,000.
Yeah, so that's just going to be your farm. It's falling off. So all of your construction should be complete, and that is you should see that here in the next few slides.
Do you project any sales tax revenue in 22 from the retail locations at the farm?
The construction change, and also good call. Also, we are projecting that potentially there will be a decrease because we did have a higher revenue from construction and retail sales. And with all of your stimulus money that is going to be slowing down or going away, and then student loans that are going to be coming back, there are a few other things. We are projecting that there will be a downward trend. If we are wrong, that's going to be great. But I did want to be fairly conservative just in case, because we don't know what COVID will bring.
Considering national trends, that's being very conservative based on sales projections.
John, was your question generally whether they're going to decrease or whether or not that number include projected sales tax revenue from the?
It started with, did it include sales tax revenue from the retail locations at the farm, which we do not get in 2021. There's nothing leased that should be leased by and generating revenues by 2022. But then Laura also mentioned the rationale for why the decrease that she's projecting in sales tax revenue. So she's saying that she's being very conservative.
Yes, and we do have farm revenues in 2021. So that is likely to decrease there.
You got farm revenues from construction, correct?
Correct. Okay, so this is just projecting out a little bit farther. And in 2020, we do have CARES revenue. I think the easiest way is just you can see that there is a decrease here in revenues. And then in 2020, you can see we had the CARES bump that helped with revenues. At this point in time, I just noted property tax. I did not include a 1% increase. The EMS levy I did. And then we are projecting that services could resume mid 2022. I do not know what just happened. Does anyone else see that?
There's a red line in there.
Yeah, I saw Nathan Lerma's name come up a minute.
We'll do our best to coordinate with Joe on that.
Let's just try real quick. All right, so I can get this. Okay, so from here, I just wanted to touch base on some financial management policies. So at this point in time, we do note that one-time construction sales tax should be transferred from the general fund to capital improvement funds. This is going to be how we fund all of our capital outlay needs. And then we also have a policy that notes that the operating budget is not supposed to be using one-time revenues for ongoing expenditures. So that's things like your salaries, any kind of reoccurring expense. And that is something that we have done, especially in the last couple of years because of COVID. We did have significant revenue losses, so transfers for capital outlay were put off. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of what exactly happened. So we have all of these transfers. So this is money that's coming in that we wouldn't normally get. And I believe in 2018, they did a transfer for $400,000 for the construction sales tax. So we didn't do any in 2019 or 2020, mainly because, as you'll see here in the next couple slides, if we had, it would have significantly decreased our reserves. So in the CIP plan for our projects, we did have general fund reserves of $829,000 that was going to be funding the capital improvement fund for one of the projects. We had another almost $140,000 that was going to fund another project. We had budgeted a $20,000 transfer to the municipal arts for the different projects for that 1%. And I do want to note, it is 1% of the construction projects, but it does not include any kind of REIT funded, grant funded, or stormwater project. So that's where that 20,000 is coming from. That is something that is still going to be due because we do have these projects, they are going to happen. So that is something that will need to happen no matter what. And then in 2019, 2020, the construction sales tax is roughly $1.3 million. And that is a transfer that should have come out of the general fund in the last biennium, but it did not. And so right now we're projecting for 2021. So for this current biennium, we're looking at about $1.1 million in construction sales tax. So at this point in time, I'm recommending doing the 20,000 transfer and the 1.1, because at this point in time, with everything that happened with COVID, I think it would be best to go and follow policy as of now forward. And I will note that policy does say should and not that you have to do this transfer. So we are covering losses. We are trying to keep our general fund healthy, because if we were to take all of that money out of there, we're going to be below our reserve level that we have to have. So we have the one-time revenues that were left in the general fund. It was to offset COVID losses. And then going forward, we'll just use the funding to fund our different capital projects, because we do, I know Mike Todd had mentioned this, we do have roughly $20 million that is budgeted that we have funding for our capital improvement plan. We do have around 40 million that we do not have funding allocated at this time. And so I just wanted to kind of make sure everyone could see where these numbers are coming from. So in 19, 20, and 21, we have construction sales tax. I will note the 2021, the very last 3 months are estimated based on averages, looking at how sales tax comes in, where we were at this year compared to previous years, that kind of thing. And then I did the same thing for 2022. So that is where I'm getting the number for our 21-22 transfer to the capital improvement fund so that we can keep our community in good shape. And then I just noted, this is from the last budget that was done. And it just discusses that one-time revenues shouldn't be in the general fund left there. So, and then also I wanted to note, I just wanted everyone to see the general fund. We do have the different projects that we're relying on the general fund revenue. So this is where I'm getting these amounts. Okay, so with the two transfers, that puts us here. So you've got revenues in green, in the darker green, and then the expenses kind of in like that peach color. You can see that, you know, we have COLA, we have all of your expenses typically do increase either annually or, you know, at least within a span of 5 years. And you can see that the fund balance does decrease. This is holding property taxes flat. So if we were to increase property taxes, that would change your fund balance. Okay, so this is where we're going to go into the different transfers. If we were to do none of the transfers, not fund any of our capital improvement projects, this is where our funds would land. So you can see in 2014, we had about 6.5 million. We dropped in 16. So I did do this by budget cycle because otherwise it's really hard to follow the trends. So you can see that each year we were losing just short of 300,000. And then in 2020, we had COVID hit, we had CARES funding. We tried to shut down as much spending as possible because they had projected that we were going to have 20% revenue losses, NLC had. So at this point in time, if we had not done any transfers, we would end up at about 7.2 million. If we went ahead and did all of the planned transfers, it would bring us down to $3.7 million. And our 15% reserve is a bare minimum of, it's about 4.5 million. So we would have to set up a plan to get our reserves back to where they would need to be if we decided to fully fund our CIP. I do feel like because we have so many projects that are still in early stages, we don't have defined amounts. I do feel like we could make progress later. It's not something that has to be done right now. And if we absolutely needed to, ARPA funds are available through the revenue loss category for capital improvements that help the public. So that is something to keep in mind if we did decide, oh, we didn't fund all of our capital projects. We were really hoping to get this done. You know, the community really would like this. ARPA is another way to get something done if we absolutely needed it. So this is my recommended, I'm sorry, that heading did not pull over well. So this is the recommended transfers. So I am recommending doing the municipal art fund transfer. So that 1%, just because these projects are going to happen. And it's just a better practice. This is municipal code. And then the other is just the construction sales tax transfer to the CIF fund for the 21-22 biennium. At this point in time, I feel like with COVID, it's reasonable to note that we didn't do the transfer so that we could keep our general fund healthy. So again, we're just looking at, as long as this is something council is okay with, just doing the transfer to municipal arts and then just the construction sales tax to the CIF. Okay, so I'm going to start moving into expenses from here, and then I'm not going to go through everything just because a lot of it is repeat from last week. So here you can see that fire and police make up about 65% of our general fund expenses. Overall, it's roughly about 5% for each other department. Okay, this is just a breakdown of the different categories that our expenses fall in. And then it is just projected to 2026. So in here, I did add the one-time revenue transfers for 21 and 22, the arts transfer, and then we do have the unbudgeted expenses related to COVID in here as well. And we have tried to keep expenses as flat as possible. Okay, and then this is just going to go into each department. This should look familiar from last week. You can see 2020 expenses were higher just because we did than 2022, because we did have that extra $1 million from CARES that we had to get out to the community. So that is something to remember when we're looking at the different levels of expenses. Okay, so from there, I did go ahead and add this in. This is just a breakdown for each department and how all of their expenses fall into place. And then it's just projected out. And I did make notes at the bottom. If anyone does have questions that they don't get answered tonight, feel free to email me, call me, and we can walk through anything. If you want adjustments made to something, we can work through that before the last budget amendment is approved.
Oh, I have a question, a bunch of questions.
Yes.
Can you go back one slide for me? I just wanted to clarify again, when I was looking at the expenses last year, under communications and marketing, in 2020, when it jumped to 1.1, was that due to CARES money being put in communications?
Yes. Yeah, that's where everything was expensed out of, or the majority of it, for our business grants as well as our service organization grants.
So,
Because typically it would have gone way, it would have been way down just like 2021.
right, it was over $1 million.
Yes, and that is the CARES funding.
So we took it out, we would have been for like 14.9. Yeah, not it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't make out what you were saying.
The expenditures were $1 million less.
Yeah, it's roughly about $1 million less.
And then from what I understand, what you're requesting, and I'm sorry if I'm not quite sure, our policy is not to take, our policy is to not take one-time revenues and apply them to recurring expenses. But you are recommending that we do that this time, because otherwise it will take us below our minimum threshold of assurance, correct?
Correct.
I heard that correct, okay.
Oh, that's partly correct. There's one transfer we didn't do a biennium ago, and so she's recommending we do one of the two.
Yes,
So it's
I
not
am
really-
recommending this for 2021 and 2022. I am not recommending the 2019-2020 biennium one.
You had two check the musical arts and so. So if we did not do that, which we don't absolutely recommending it because it would take us below this threshold, but we don't need to do that because, as you said, we do have other funds coming available. We could take a look at what's happening when we get to that point, and see if we need to. We have other funds we could draw on if we do need to draw on them. But I guess I'm a little confused as to why would we want to take this action unless we absolutely had to. The city's going to,
Well, our policy is to do it. So I do feel like for 2021 and 2022, we should. Because of COVID, I don't know that 2019 and 2020 is really necessary, mainly because we do have ARPA funding for revenue losses if we needed it. And in that revenue loss category, it's specifically GFOA has recommended that cities put this toward your capital outlay, because it is going to be something that helps the community for years to come. And it is not something that's going to be a reoccurring expense. So if you had decided to hire a bunch of new people with ARPA funding, that's going to be a continuing expense. And eventually ARPA funding is going to run out. And then you're going to have to either get rid of the people that you've hired, or you're going to have to increase taxes to bring in that additional revenue to support the additional ongoing expenses. So that is,
I don't think that's the question he's asking. 3 or 4 years ago, when we adopted the financial policy, we decided that we don't want to support the general fund with one-time revenue such as construction sales tax. And so our policy was we move those out of the general fund and into the CIP, or the
Yes.
capital improvement funding. We did not, for some reason, make that transfer in 19 and 20. And we have the opportunity to make that transfer and or the transfer for 21, 22, or 2021. I don't have my years, I don't have the slide up in front of me. So she's recommending that despite not making that one transfer, we leave that in the general fund because of COVID, but make the transfer for the current biennium.
And if we did both the transfers, that would be able to take us below our threshold.
That's correct.
But if we did take both thresholds, we'd be keeping with their financial guidelines.
I'm sorry, if we what?
If we took both transfers according to our financial guidelines, and we went below our threshold, we'd still be able to operate. That's not the issue. Next
we
question.
would,
That's correct. Our financial policy, I think, covered both issues. I think in the financial policy, we established a baseline that we wanted to keep it on reserve of 15%.
Correct.
And also move this. So I thought I heard her say that 15% would be a little north of 4 million.
Right.
yeah.
4.5. So if we move both, we would be consistent with one policy, but inconsistent with another.
If we move both, I believe, Laurel, you said we'd be at 3.7. Is that
Yes.
correct?
If we move all of them, where did we go? I'm sorry. If we move all of them, we'll be at 3.7.
Okay, so we did 3.7 versus the 4.5, which is not devastating, but keeping with our guidelines, which I would think may make more sense than not keeping.
I will say that we will have to come up with a plan to make up that difference. So whether that's cutting expenses or other creative ways, we will have to make sure that we bring that reserve back up to where it needs to be.
Yeah, and I think we need to be clear. We have two policies. One is to move the one-time revenues and the other is to have 15%. If we make both the transfers, we'd be meeting that policy, but we'd be falling below the other policy, which calls for a 15%.
Right.
And I will say that with the,
Which would call for an action, a plan. What are we gonna do? We go below 15%.
And that's why she's recommending we make one of the two transfers.
So we don't have to fall below 15% and make up a plan.
Right.
Yeah. I just,
because with COVID, we don't know what's going to happen. And if we are going to do the transfers and we're way below, or if we're already below our reserve, it does create more risk if something did happen. And while we do have ARPA funding, that is more limited on how we can use it, because you can't just stick ARPA in reserves.
in 2019, we did not take a transfer according to our financial guidelines. What happened? And that's
Yes,
what-
in 19 and 20, we did not.
Which is why we're in this position today.
Right, but if we had done it, then we wouldn't have that one-time revenue to cover the losses from the other revenue sources, from like passports and recreation, licensing, that kind of thing.
This is not a matter of being out of alignment in our budgets or our plan for this year. is because we didn't follow the guidelines. Make this decision.
I'm sorry, you were cutting out, but I-
To follow the guidelines, but if we want to make up for our mistake in 19, it's going to take us below our threshold.
Well, we wouldn't have made a mistake in 19 because we wouldn't have known in 19 what our sales tax revenue was going to be. We wouldn't have known that till 20, and I think that was part of the reason why
20, we didn't take it.
we didn't take it at the time because we were in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, I will say in the budget that was presented, it did state that they were not going to be doing the transfers, like the different, there was quite a bit that they went into because of COVID, just to prepare.
It's the right thing to do. Follow the guidelines, or
We're just teeing this up for discussion in a couple weeks. That's the issue we have to decide.
sorry, we don't think.
Yeah, we're not making a decision on that tonight.
Okay.
Correct. All right. So from there, we'll just fly through these. You should have access to these. So if you have any questions or if you feel like you missed something, feel free to contact me. This is just going to be the split for each department and projecting out through 2026. Okay, and then these are the last of them, and this does include the construction transfer in 2021 and 2022. Okay,
Well,
and then
it's John again. I got a question on these. I'm sorry. I don't know about the rest of the council members. I pulled my agenda up from the website. I have your motions. I don't have any of these PowerPoints.
correct, yes, you will be receiving them.
We'll be receiving these separately. So it would be better if I could receive them somehow prior to the meeting so I could study them in advance. I think I'd be able to ask better questions.
Yes.
Rather than be to look at them right here for the first time. But so just to clarify, one of the things we asked you for last week was the breakout on legal costs so that we could see the amortization, the trends on those legal costs.
Yes,
And you were going to do it, I think, by department.
yes,
This is it right now.
yes, that was the next slide.
All right.
So on this slide, we have 2021 is in blue, 2020 is in red, and 2019 is in green. So right now, we're right around 30% lower than 2020. We are projecting that around by 2023, legal costs will be decreasing significantly. I do have the breakout by department on the right for the 2021-2022 so far. And so in your clerk section, that is the open records assistance for redacting and all of the confidential information assistance, that kind of thing. And then I will note that we are currently for 2021 and 2022 negotiating both the ASME and the Guild collective bargaining agreements.
How does 2021, does that compare against what we were budgeted to do? Do we know?
We are above where we were budgeting, yes. And I will have, once we get,
I'm sorry, Laurel, by how much?
I will have to get you specifics on that. That was something when I went ahead and compared the actuals to our amended. I was going to have everything next to each other so that we could see the differences.
Okay, that would help. That'd be better, actually.
Right.
Laurel, trying to figure out how to ask this question. Our current arrangement with our city attorneys, we have a baseline monthly retainer essentially we pay for the basic legal services. is that broken out into these numbers by department, or is that simply reflected in the city manager line item?
The city attorney is in the city manager line item.
Okay, so if we were to compare apples, so this is 21, 22. If we're looking at 2020 legal fees, did our prior city attorney have a retainer, or is it simply an hourly basis by category? So if we, for instance, see bills for HR or for police matters, or do you know?
That I am not entirely sure. I came in at the tail end.
No, that's fine. I think it's important. I mean, we need to keep the eye on the attorney's fees, but it's very challenging to be able to compare apples to apples because there's so many variations from one year to the next in terms of the nature of contracts that are being negotiated and what litigation is pending. So that's why I want to be cautious when we just start throwing numbers around. They don't tell the whole story without the explanation of what is tied. So we need to keep the eye on the numbers, but we also need to be mindful of what's driving those numbers.
And the numbers that you've given us here, 2021, are great. We can bring them up by the department, but source. The question is, can you pull those numbers for 20 and 19 as well by that same department breakup?
Yes, I will be doing that.
That will really be an eye opener. See where we're going up.
Yeah, and I will say that for previously in with the last finance director, I do believe they had wrapped everything in one line. So that was where it was getting tricky because all legal was just in one spot. And so it wasn't broken out based on who was using what. It was just so that they could keep it all in one easy line. So while I can provide what was posted, I don't know that it's going to be as helpful for comparison to where we're spending money, like what it's being spent for, because in 2019 and 20, it was in one specific line. But I will try to get it broken out. I may have to just go through each invoice, so it'll be time consuming.
Well, I think from reviewing the invoice, or not the invoices, the fees, the vouchers, sorry, that our prior city attorney was billing us by matter. So that's what led us here, is because we had one line item that was lump sum and we had no separated. And so that's the challenge, I think. And the best we could probably do is to go back at the vouchers and look at how Ogden Murphy billed us, so we can break down by human resources and various topics. But that's, I think, I'm not sure that will give us a perfect comparison to the way we're looking at the numbers now, but it'll get us a step closer than we are.
Yeah, we may have to look at just the retainer as one item and the bundling the other item.
Yeah, because I have like the monthly Ogden Murphy cost, but I don't have it broken out. So, and I mean, we can work through that. I can have staff help. Were there any other questions or comments? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to start moving in. The last few slides are just the ones that I had tweaked. So on this one, I went ahead and added the $8,000 for the utility boxes. And then we had $300 that were spent that were related to the historical preservation project in 2021. And then in 2022, we are looking at, I want to say they're frames or plaques for finalizing the historical preservation project. And then I think lighting around those frames, or I'm not 100% certain, the plaques. There we go.
Lighting on the
boxes, were we looking to put it in the municipal, take it from the municipal arts fund, or would we talk about taking it from the council?
I'm sorry, did you say out of the council
Contingency fund.
Contingency?
Where the fund's supposed to come from for the boxes.
If that's where you guys would like them to come from, I can move that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought that's what we discussed last week.
Yeah.
I
Steve said you're not.
may have missed that. I can adjust that. Okay. And then this is just the other fund that was impacted from the transfers. So that 2021 revenue and the 2022 revenue were just updated. Okay, and I believe that should
You
be,
still need to update the expenditures, correct?
I don't think so.
Those are correct expenditures?
Yeah, that was what was budgeted anyway for 21 and 22.
Yeah, really, that was what was budgeted, that's when it comes, has been updated. Actual.
Yeah, this is Director Todd. So I think Councilmember Streckler is probably correct. That's what's budgeted. We've not adjusted the budget yet. We will by the end of the year to say, okay, we're not going to do pavement restoration this year in 21. We'll move some of those dollars to 22. So you'll see some of those move. Because remember, we talked about that. This is very front loaded with incredible pace on projects. So some of this money is going to move. And you'll have an opportunity at the mid-biennium adjustment period to do that, but it won't change the biennium. So we're not too concerned
Correct.
about that, but it will show in different column on this chart. Councilmember Steckler is correct there.
Yes. So overall, your budget amendment is, it doesn't really matter if it happens in 21 or 22, just because overall, that is your authority with those two together. And it had just been broken out in previous presentations. So I was wanting to follow that so that council could see something that was at least semi-familiar. All right, and then this is everything I have. If anyone has any more questions, I am happy to answer them.
I think the main question is, what are our next steps from here?
So from here, we're going to have, if anyone has any comments or if they want to email me questions, I will make sure that I've got all of the expenditures that we're expecting in this budget. And then on the 9th, we will have a hearing for our levies. So we'll have a hearing for a property tax levy, and then we'll have a hearing for the EMS. And then all that does is say, yes, we're either going to take the 1% or we're not going to take the 1%. And then that just finalizes my revenue projections. And then from there, that next meeting, we can adopt the amended budget. And then I send that on to the SAO. And then if needed, if we do decide we need more adjustments or another adjustment, we do have all of 22 to do that.
Does our adopted budget assume one way or the other adoption of property tax increase in 2022, or are we silent on that?
For this amendment, I did not include a 1% increase on property taxes. I did include a 1% on the EMS because that is historically what has happened.
No, my question is, when we adopted the budget, did the budget assume?
It assumed that we did not have
Okay.
the
So
1%.
it just, the budget that was adopted reflected our decisions for 2021, but did not make any assumptions about 2022.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Any final questions before we move on? Okay, as Director Gimsnow said, if you have any questions, you can follow up with her. Okay, Michael, we'll move on to old business, item F, following up on our discussion last week about efforts to support the police recruitment efforts for laterals.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of council. It was a very nice morning. I met with Communications and Marketing Department and asked them to move quickly with regard to the market video discussion. I believe Vice President Smith from the Guild had referenced the city of Kirkland as an example. And I know that the Communications and Marketing team worked not only to see that as a model, I provided some marketing and materials that I have available. And we've developed a plan that at this point is divided into 4 different areas. I'm not going to read through the agenda summary, but we talked about what the purpose of the video is and what is going to be the main message. The concept is intended to highlight and spotlight our force in the community, our police force, and visually showcase the city of Mill Creek. For those of us that have not come from Mill Creek and are new to the area, this is a remarkable community, and we believe that it is a very attractive place to work. And then finally, we talk about distribution, publishing. Also, very significant. We solicited ideas both from Martin and I, from both Police Chief Young and also from the leadership of the Police Officers Guild, meeting by Zoom last Friday with President Mack and Vice President Smith. The Guild has provided a list to us, which I asked for, and appreciate it. And Chief Young has also provided a list. So we are working through these in consultation with our legal counsel. We're going to need to not only vet these, cost them out, and really determine, as I mentioned to President Mack and Vice President Smith on Friday, that both teams, the City of Mill Creek negotiating team as well as the Guild, need to rely upon their legal counsel for direction on what items on the list are appropriate for either collective bargaining or something that we can act on immediately. Realizing at the end of the last council meeting that the marketing video was something. We also received from council the approval for my signature on an MOU, increasing the lateral incentive package up to $20,000. I received a response from the union regarding the MOU, and we are working through with our legal counsel a response that I'm going to provide to the president of the Guild. I don't want to really foray too much into that topic, but I'm confident we have a path forward on it. I want to be able to afford the Guild then the opportunity to reflect on what I've written to them, and I believe the recommendation is about 48 hours. We could, by the end of this week, actually have the lateral incentive package posted on both the NTN and PST website. We still then have the work of at least looking at the ideas. It was a brainstorming session. The Guild brought a list to us. We talked it through on Friday. Chief Young also brought a list on Monday, which we discussed with myself and Martin. We're going to be, all of those are under serious consideration. Look at this in a larger context, collective bargaining, as well as city's budget.
City Manager.
Yes.
So when you talk about list, I mean, I'm a little confused. I don't know what that means. Having to do with recruitment or with collective bargaining?
There are nuances in it that could impact.
All right. I'm sorry. I guess I'm still a little confused. I thought the agreement that we had verbally here was to just kind of collectively put our heads together for recruitment measures. So is your list deviating from that?
There are recruitment aspects to the list. Some of them on their face are purely recruitment. We don't want to expound upon legal advice, but I would like to say that a careful analysis of what is proposed is in order. And my intention this evening was to provide merely an update to council about our progress.
I like what we have here, and I agree with everything you've done, coupled with the 20,000 incentive pay. I think it's a great start. Good stuff coming together with everybody. Thank you.
Michael, what's the ETA on the video? I mean, we heard from Mr. Smith last week, they thought that would be very helpful to the effort. So are we trying to get that done by?
Yes, Mayor, my direction to the communications and marketing team is to do, I'm just calling the 1.0 quickly, which is slated to be 1 minute or less. And I've asked them to do that as soon as possible before then going back in modifying it for a more extended version of it. So, although Scott and Jody were unable to commit to a date, I can tell you that there's already a tentative plan with specific scheduling in mind to try and move this. I would hope that at the very latest by the end of this month, at the very latest, we'd have that video available, posted part of the brochure. Could be earlier. I just telling council now that the more extended version is going to take a little bit longer, but we would like to give a shorter version of book.
Yeah, I can provide a little more detail on how we're at. Give the council and everyone an idea. We did take some drone footage yesterday. Where we took our Pavement Marking is right along with PD did some interviews. Right now, we have a lot of footage that we need to parse out and select what will be part of the first or second video. So it made a lot of progress this week alone. A few more interviews going this week, probably Thursday, and then by Friday they'll have a big chunk of it done. So I think we're getting real close, and it might be a little optimistic, but I think for the weekend, month end would be probably feasible. But so only that, I think we're moving on really quick.
We're working hard for the short version by the end of the year. Really great.
Just a request from me on that. I know you have to review with legal. You can't commit to a date, but if possible, we can if we can pull out the recruitment items that are not tied to collective bargaining. If we can discuss those by our next meeting on the 26th, that would be great. If you can do that, that would be a great target. At the council, I know we put recruitment ideas that we can pursue. But the other request I would have in addition to that is video is a great idea. Can we also have by the 26th a plan of what we're going to do with that video? We get it because we got a video. What's the plan for utilization? We're just posting it. How are we posting it? What sites are we posting it to? When will we be posting it? And how will we be directing people to it? Which sites are we going after? What ways can we use this video effectively? We have time to get that done by the 26th. That would be a great one to come back with. So, an effective recruitment plan for the video would be my request.
Yep, through the chair, item 4 on the agenda summary talks about distribution and publishing. The channels right now being contemplated are through social media, through YouTube, employment listings. We don't have those specific listings, so we will work on obtaining that for the 26th, as well as other possible social groups and organizations. I'll also note that the President Mack had indicated that he was aware of some professional video producers that maybe I'm not certain of the cost associated with, but with our new communications and marketing team, we not only have a capable team, but I know that Scott Harder is especially experienced in this area. And this is an opportunity for us to celebrate producing this video on a cost effective. I am going to receive links from President Mack. I think moving at a really quick pace. We got started in earnest on Wednesday.
Thank you, City Manager. And I did see this. I was looking. These are great as overall targets. I want to see something specific as to if we're going to do YouTube, how are you going to do YouTube? If you're going to do social, what kind of social media sites are you going to do? It says social organizations. That's great. Let's do the research and find out what social organizations are out there that potential police officers would be going to. Now's the time to be doing that so that we do get the video. You could launch it all in 2 weeks. I'll start searching it. So these are great. Just I would ask them to flesh it out the specific application to have those ready and we can know where we'll be going with it. That would be wonderful. You can specific social.
Yeah, the outline in the agenda summary was intended to give a 50,000-foot view of where we're at and what we're charting out. So those categories will be more specific, and we'll work to refine that best we can by this.
Item H is somewhat related to this. Is there any objection if I move in and give an update on that really quick? So item H, one of the other things we heard last week was the challenges being presented with our officers with the new police reform measures. So we had given the city manager direction, bring us a resolution similar to what other cities have passed, such as Everett, and I think Lake Stevens. I think there's a few more. I was contacted by April Berg, representative from 44th yesterday, and she's requested to meet with us to discuss some of these issues before we consider the resolution. So we have a meeting scheduled, I believe, for Thursday, the 21st, with the deputy mayor, myself, city manager, and the police chief, talk with both April Berg and Representative Lovick, so we can express some of the challenges that our officers are having and with the legislation, and that we have that discussion before we have bring up the resolution for action. So that is, if there's no objection, I'd like to propose that we pursue with that plan and then come back to you, report back to you on the 20th. Keeps cutting out. Report back to you on the 26th with what comes out of those discussions, and we can go from there. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was prepared to talk about this tonight, and I know things get pulled off the schedule here and there. I don't really understand what visiting with our local, are they going to convene an emergency session between now and then? Is that what's going to happen? I guess, I don't understand. I just noticed now when my computer updated that my resolution was pulled. So I'm a little surprised, disappointed. I think it's a topic we should have talked about. We don't need legislative approval.
The concern that was expressed to me was that the cities are circulating this resolution and none of the cities have contacted the state representatives to discuss their issues or concerns. And so Representative Berg requested that we have that discussion before we act on it. So I think it's fair that we have that discussion and see what we can do to address our concerns, and we can bring it back 2 weeks from now. And if we want to consider passing the resolution based notwithstanding what we hear from our meeting on the 21st, and that can be the will of the council.
So just having said that, I think if we're going to meet with the representatives, it should be here in person for the public to consume, not just some internal meeting or memo. I don't think that's right.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Bond?
So John Levitt, hired Sergeant of State Patrol, longtime member of the state legislature, as well as some other roles we served in sheriff's county.
And here, city council.
City council. That's correct. So I'd be curious if he wants to come and talk to us and tell us his role in this legislation. And I assume he didn't support it. I don't know what he voted on, but it's such bad legislation. I have to assume, given the benefit of the doubt, that he didn't support it. But I'd like to hear, if he wants to come talk to us, I'd love to hear him out. I'd love to hear his thoughts on that.
Is there any objection to us meeting with them on the 21st and asking them also to be present to have a discussion with them on the 26th? Okay. I will check with them tomorrow to see if they are available for that. Okay. Anything else on that? So that brings us back to item G, city manager and police chief on the service agreement.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Young, take it away.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Member, 10 members of council. As you know, the city of Mill Creek has partnered with Bridge Coordination Services to provide victim advocate services for the past several years, and the need for these services has never been greater. The police department is seeking to renew the contract with Bridge Coordination Services to ensure continuity of services. At this point, we're seeking authorization from council for the city manager to execute a 2-year service agreement with Bridge Coordination Services in the amount of $40,898 for calendar year 2022 and $40,898 for calendar year 2023. This does reflect the cost increase for both calendar years 2022 and 23. Our current budget amount for 2020 to 22 was $30,225. We have worked internally to try to resolve that. unfortunately, there's not much we're going to be able to do with it. So with that, I'll take any questions that I may answer.
Councilmember Bond.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for bringing this. I support this. Victims not only have to get through the initial challenges of reporting whatever it is they're going through to us, law enforcement personnel, your people, they need to then have support in going through the process. And I just had a successful prosecution of a person who we had a victim, a female victim. She needed support. She was a child at the time of the crime. It took almost 2 years. And those advocates that were there helping her through that process, and her mother have the courage to see it through. These are not timely. Sometimes they are difficult for these victims to go through and to sort of relive. Unfortunately, the system, not intending to harm these people, sort of sometimes there's a feeling of being re-victimized. And these advocates do a lot to reduce that and to help those folks be empowered and successfully get through this cumbersome process. So thank you for bringing this before us. I support it completely.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Chief, for bringing this to us. I, of course, in favor of this extremely important that we are providing this service. I would also like to recommend later, once we do the budget and everything else, that I personally would love to hear, and I imagine the public might would love to hear an overview of this service that we are providing. I'm not sure everyone's aware that much to help out for domestic violence, and I'm sure that there was probably interest in the community to hear that we are doing measures. So I would be interested in a broad overview later when we have the time at that on the back burner. Thanks.
Anyone care to make a motion?
I would, Mayor. Propose motion to have the city manager execute a service agreement between city and bridge coordination service for victim advocate services in the amount of $40,898 for calendar year 2022. $40,898 for calendar year 2020. Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Chief. Moving on to the consent agenda. Item I, approval of checks number 63840 through 63882 and AHC wire transfers in the amount of $141,321.44. Audit Committee is Councilmember Cavalieri and myself. Any exceptions?
No exception.
No exceptions. Item J, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $215,308.67.
No exception.
No exceptions. And the city council meeting minutes of September 7th, 2021 and October 5th, 2021. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda is approved 7-0. On to reports. I think what I want to report on, we covered in the discussion on the police recruiting efforts. The only other thing I'll note is I think you probably all got a email in the last few days from the AWC. I noted that they have their 3 legislative priorities for the coming year on there. I was a little surprised there's only 3, but the 3 seem to focus on public works and infrastructure. That will apparently be their focus on our behalf in the coming session. Mayor Pro Tem, any report tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. No report.
Councilmember Bond, any report?
No report, but a quick comment. I don't see Tom Rogers on here listening to us. So I just want to say that as I begin my new adventure with the city of Sultan, I have a tremendous appreciation for Tom Rogers and what he has done in the planning commission, the planners, the staff, the community development. There is so much stuff going on behind the scenes that I had no idea. The work that the staff puts in so that we can look at something and vote yes or no. And I'm very impressed and humbled, and I just want to give a shout out to Tom and the good work him and his people do.
Thank you. Councilmember Steckler, any report tonight?
Just a few quick things. This microphone. Just a few quick things. First of all, City Manager, thank you. And Director Todd for the update on the capital improvement projects. I'm glad we got that done. I'm glad we got that out. I think it was a real eye opener. I appreciate that. I wanted to also just reiterate on two other requests. One, a couple weeks ago, we talked about doing a study session on the ARPA application process and strategies from other cities. We're targeted to do that in about 2 weeks, so, or at the end of the month. I just wanted to reiterate that. So looking forward to that. Hopefully that's on the schedule that we will. Going to see that either in the next couple of council meetings, 26th or the one after that. And also, update on the grant activity. I still have not seen anyone come to the council with anything for fourth quarter grants. And I went online and took a look, and there was a tremendous amount of county and specifically state grants that are available out there with fourth quarter deadlines. Some like broadband infrastructure. One I saw specifically was for 223 million for cities to develop their own broadband. There's other ones in there. I don't know if these are applicable in Outdoor City, but the list was quite extensive, and I still want to reiterate my request once again for a calendar of all the application grant opportunities that are out there. Which ones do we want to go after? Because I have to assume at this time, it's October 12th, I haven't seen anything. We're not going to go after any grants in fourth quarter because we've not come to the council and asked for approval to go after any grants. So that looks like we're not going to go after anything in fourth quarter. It's going to be probably our lowest grant year in a long time. I think we really need to get an aggressive program and proactive program in place in regards to grants. I know I'm a broken record, but I just want to bring that up again. There's a tremendous opportunity out there.
Yeah. Through the chair, Councilman Steckler, I appreciate that. I also want to sound a broken record. There have been a number of challenges for us. First and foremost, last year, we have a new team led by Director Mike Todd, one more engineering. So we actually have a capital improvement plan Mike Todd just presented tonight that shows that we're going to be needing to come back and actually talk about where there's actual dollars in those lines and where we had assumptions relating to where we were at in funding for each of those lines. In order for us to apply for grants, we would assume that we'd already have been in the scoping phase of the discussions that we have had. If it's something new we want to do with a new project, we can look at that. And we're open to any direction the council will give. So if you want to share that list or send it over as a link that you were referencing about deadlines for the fourth, I would be happy to go over that with you and see where we are and are not possibly aligned. For example, the broadband you referenced has a very specific set of criteria that first and foremost requires an assessment of where we might be suffering connectivity issues. A preliminary review of that indicates that we would not meet the criteria because City of Mill Creek is, for all intents and purposes, well connected Wi-Fi. So that's one example of something that is not necessarily on the top of our list. We've also talked about the use of those ARPA funds, mainly for what they were intended, and that was to plug gaps where we've had shortfalls using the baseline of 2019. We need to be able to establish a way to modulate that spending in relationship to forecasting. And we don't have money right now to go after a match for grants until we get further direction from council in this budget. So my concern is that in pushing for these grants, I might not have done a good enough job of explaining where we're at in terms of the grant scheme. So what I'd like to do is when we come back, I'm going to work with our finance director and our public works director and with our deputy city manager to try and do a better job of explaining why you're not seeing us applying for grants right now. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Cavalieri, any report tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, one very proud report. As of yesterday, I became a grandfather for the first time. Yeah. And baby girl, Cavalieri, well, they named her. Her last name is obviously something else. But anyhow, my daughter's doing just fine. They hopefully leave from the hospital in the morning, and the world is blessed to have another child. Thank you.
Congratulations. Councilmember Browse, any reports tonight?
No report.
Councilmember Morgan,
Thank you, Mayor. No report.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quickly, I want to note for the community that we're currently experiencing challenges with both of our street sweepers. And I know that Director Todd and Matthew Combs are working hard both on what we call PW10, which is the one that broke down last couple of weeks ago, the last week of September, and PW9. We're trying to diagnose the problem with both of these vehicles. We believe one of them has a clogged diesel particulate filter, causing constant calls for regeneration. Why am I getting down to that level of granularity? Both of these trucks may be something that we need to come back at in the future to talk about whether we want to invest, kind of like with the used car. Do we want to spend some money significantly overhauling these vehicles, or do we want to buy new ones? We're at that point. In the meantime, we're trying to develop plans for redundancy. And what the Public Works Department has discovered is that, like many other sectors of the community, the employment for the street sweepers, there's challenges with many of the contractors about potentially an emergency. Some of them, it's not simply called us back. The ones that Matthew has spoken to aren't necessarily interested. The remainder aren't necessarily qualified. So we're working on a plan B and a plan C in that regard, while continuing to Band-Aid and fix the two street sweepers. And with that, I will conclude my report.
Thank you, Michael. That brings us to Litigation Part 2. Would anyone like to speak to the council tonight? I see one hand. Let me check screen 2. Looks like 2 hands, and Barb was quick to the draw as usual. So we'll start with Barb, I'm sorry, and then move to Mr. Nelson. Go ahead,
Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place Southeast, Mill Creek. Thank you, Mayor. I do hope that there is no delay in getting all the issues related to putting out the word via social media or any and all ways for hiring officers to be resolved quickly. We cannot drag our feet. The sooner the better. Act quickly. Our safety of the officers and the community are of utmost importance and highest priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Will, name and address. Unmute yourself, please.
Unmute.
There
Okay.
you go.
Will Nelson, 14925 29th Drive Southeast, Mill Creek, Washington. On the street sweepers, I was under the impression, having sat in the council meeting several years ago, that money was thrown into the stormwater levy to buy 2 new street sweepers, in that the regulations or whatever we go by on that allows for street sweepers to be considered part of stormwater, surface water maintenance, cleanup, whatever. So there should be money there for that, if my recollection is correct. And we could junk those 2 old pieces of machinery and buy 2 new ones. However, in the past, I'm being sarcastic here, our ability to make purchase requests for trucks seems to be somewhat lacking. So I would not be too disappointed if we run into the same thing with the street sweepers. Another point regarding Cavallari's MOU last week, I had a revelation, but I'm not a religious person. What are we to do as citizens if we run into a situation where we have to interface with the police or the fire department with people who have not had their vaccinations? And we don't want to interface with somebody who has not been vaccinated. I have already had my booster. I would appreciate some guidance on how we handle these people. I'm sure a cop would get pissed as hell if we said to him, you hadn't had your shot, so I don't want to talk to you. I don't think he's going to take too kindly to that. So, you know, just a point, if they don't want to get their shots, why do I have to talk to them? Should I get a speeding ticket or something? And the third point, regarding the Mill Creek Boulevard sub-area study, just looking at remembering what the last drawing was, we're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in income from market rate apartments with this stuff, or market rate condos or whatever. And if we make those things subsidized, we will lose a lot of income, which gets me to the 1% tax increase. Do we want to forgive or forget about potential income from new apartment building and forgo that income when it'll be possible to enhance the city coffers with that money? Thank you.
Thank you, Will. I check the screen to see if there's other hands on screen too. Seeing none, before we have to adjourn to executive session to discuss the performance of a public employee pursuant to RCW 42.30, section 110, subsection 1G. Action will not be taken when we're done. If I could have a motion to extend the regular meeting till 10. I don't think we're going to need that long, but that way avoids us having to come back to extend the meeting, and then we'll hopefully.
To stand until 10 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Let's start with 1/2 hour. So it is 8:23. So we will go 8:24, it just turned. So we will be in executive session until 8:54, and we'll go from there.
My stomach would owe you all a big favor.
Michael.
Oh, yeah,
Council has extended executive session till 9:20. Council extended executive session to 9:45. Council extended executive session until 10 PM.
We're here.
It's so cold out
Naomi? Council has concluded its executive session at 9:59, a few seconds early, and with no objection, we will adjourn the meeting.
Okay, very good. Have a good night, everyone. Stop.
there.